I hope you all doing well. And today we are going to do the chemistry Feb March 2025 paper 2 variant 2. This is the latest paper and let's get started. Question number 1 asks which container contains the gas at the highest pressure. Now recall, what does pressure mean for a gas? Pressure for a gas means the particles bumping onto the wall of the container. So if we have more particles, more pressure. That means the answer is A because A has the most particles in it. Question number 2. We are shown a cooling curve and we are asked to find which of the statements are correct about the cooling curve. So A, between U and V, the substance is condensing, which is wrong. The substance is not condensing between U and V. B, between V and W, heat is being observed from the surroundings, which is also wrong. Why? Because the temperature is not increasing or decreasing. The temperature is not increasing. That means no heat energy is being observed or given out. Part C, option C states between W and X the particles are close together and randomly arranged. Okay, let's see what is W and X. W and X is a state where the substance is in a liquid state. And that means, what does that mean? Liquid is close particles randomly arranged. That means C is the correct answer. Question number 3. We are given 4 samples of gases at room temperature at the same time. Which of these gases will diffuse the fastest? The first is carbon dioxide. We got hydrogen chloride, hydrogen sulfate, and lastly nitrogen dioxide. So for these types of questions, for diffusion is based on how much energy they have, the molecules have, and also their mass. If the molecule is heavy, it will move slower, meaning it will diffuse slower. And we are told all of them are at the same time in the same room, so the temperature must be the same, the conditions are the same. So the only factor that will affect diffusion rate is the mass of the particle. So if we calculate, carbon dioxide will be carbon dioxide, hydrogen chloride, and the other two, if we calculate their mass, we will find out that hydrogen sulfate will have the least mass. We can go to the periodic table and see. We can see here that sulfur has 32 and there is 2 hydrogen, that means 34, which is already less than hydrogen chloride, and carbon dioxide and nitrogen dioxide are heavier if you compare the masses. So the answer is pretty clear and it's hydrogen sulfide. Now let's do question number 4. So in question number 4 we are given a sulfur atom that's a negative ion now, which means it has gained 2 electrons. And we are asked how many of these atoms from this list have the same electronic configuration as the sulfur ion. Now if we look at the periodic table, we can see that sulfur has 16 electrons, and 16 electrons, if it gains 2 more, it will have 18 electrons. That way it will have the same number of electrons in argon. If we look at oxygen, if oxygen becomes oxide, it will gain 2 electrons, it will have 10, not as same as sulfur ion. And calcium has 20, which is 2 more than of our sulfur ion, negative ion. So the answer is only one of them have the same electronic configuration, which is argon. So it's B. Question number 5. We are given 2 isotopes. One isotope has 12 and the other has 14 as their nucleon number. Now we are asked which statement about these isotopes are correct. Isotopes are the different atoms of the same element with different number of neutrons but same number of protons and electrons. That means they just have difference in their physical properties. And if we look at the options, we can see B states they have the same chemical properties because they have the same number of outer shell electrons. And that is correct. So the answer is B. These questions are really straightforward, so we should not waste much time on these. Question number 6. Lithium is in group 1 of the periodic table. Nitrogen is in the group 5 of the periodic table. Lithium reacts with nitrogen to form the ionic compound lithium nitrate. What happens to the electron when lithium atoms and nitrogen atoms form the ions? Now, what happens? Lithium is in group 1, so it can lose one electron from its outer shell, so it will become a positive ion. It will become a positive ion, not a negative one, because lithium is a metal. Metal always lose electron. And nitrogen is a non-metal, so it will gain electrons. And how much? Since it's in group 5, group 5 elements will gain 3 electrons because they need 3 more for the complete orbital. So the answer is A. Lithium gains 1 and becomes a positive ion, and lithium loses 1 and nitrogen gains 3 and becomes a negative ion. So question number 7. Now we are shown 4 different types of dot and cross diagrams, and we are asked to find the correct one. B is definitely wrong because hydrogen only has 1 electron. A is also wrong. Hydrogen has only 1 electron. C is the right answer because nitrogen has 5 electrons and hydrogen each have 1, and this is ammonia. D is wrong because where's the lone pair? Question number 8. Which row identifies the positive and the negative particles present in a giant metallic lattice? Metallic lattice, if you remember, are basically positive ions with negative delocalized electrons. They're delocalized means they're out of the atoms, and the metal ions become positive particles called cations. The answer is D. Question number 9. Which formula for the named compound is correct? Sorry. So question number 9 is very simple. It just asks us which is the right name for the compound. And if we look at the very first option, the answer is A. Why? Because calcium oxide is the right answer. Calcium needs 2 electrons. Calcium can lose 2 electrons because it's a metal, and oxygen can gain 2 electrons. So if we do the cross method, we get their formula. So it's A. All other options are wrong. Question number 10. So this one involves calculation because we have been given the equation, and we are also given how much of magnesium reacts completely with dilute sulfuric acid, meaning the acid is in excess. So now we have to find the mass of magnesium sulfate that has formed. This is very simple. Just recall your mole formulae. So the first one will be number of moles is equal to mass divided by mR. Now, so we need to find the number of moles for magnesium, 12 grams, and magnesium has a mR of 24. So for the number of moles for magnesium will be 12 divided by 24, which is 1 by 2. So 1 by 2 moles of magnesium means 1 by 2 moles of magnesium sulfate. Why? Because they have the same molar ratio. And what is the mR of magnesium sulfate? It's 120. So 120 times 0.5 is 60. So 60 gram. I just rearranged this formula to find the mass. So the answer is C. We got an organic question. not real organic question, it's basically the empirical formula one. So question 11 is straightforward, the same method we have been using for the calculation for this formula. So we get the mass. We get the mass for the, what is carbon? Carbon has 12, has a mass of 12. So if we do the method, 12 by 4 for carbon, 1 by 6.5, and oxygen will be the leftover percentage. So the leftover percentage, 100 minus 40 plus 6.5 is 53.3. So 53.3 divided by oxygen has 16. So if we do the calculation for these, we get 3.33 for carbon, and for hydrogen we get 0.149, and for oxygen we get 0.33 again. So which of them is the smallest number? That's the carbon. The hydrogen. So once we are done with that, we can divide all of these values by the smallest number there is, which is the hydrogen one. We get carbon, the divided by this is almost 2, and this is 1 obviously, and this is again almost 2. So 1. So it will be 2 carbon, 1 hydrogen, and 2 oxygen. So the answer is C. Now question number 12. The value of the Avogadro constant is given, and we are asked to find the total number of atoms. Make sure you read the question carefully, because here they are asking for atoms, not the molecules for ammonia gas. Ammonia is made up of 1 nitrogen and 3 hydrogen, so total 4 different types of atoms. So we multiply, first we find how many ammonia molecules are there. So we multiply the Avogadro constant by 2. We get 1 to the power 1.204 times 10 to the power of 24 molecules of ammonia. Now we multiply that value we just got with 2, with 4. So basically we multiply this value by 8 to find the total number of atoms, not molecules. So that is, if we get 4.816 times 10 to the power of 24, which we round to 3, we get 6. We get C. Question number 13. 3 aqueous solutions L, M, and N are electrolyzed using inert electrodes. L is concentrated hydrochloric acid, so it's an acid, the one we have seen always, and M is concentrated aqueous sodium chloride, and N is dilute aqueous sodium chloride. So the first one is 100% there, because they are asking for a pale yellow green gas, which means it has to be Cl. Chlorine gas is pale yellow. So if you look at the options, it is L and M, or only L. So L has to be there, so it's not C and D. So if you look at M is concentrated sodium chloride, and this is important point to remember. If the solution is concentrated for sodium chloride or any halide salt, then the halide halogen will be forming at the positive electrode. Why? Because it's in concentrated form. But if it's dilute, it won't be forming. So the answer is L and M. There's a pale yellow gas. For dilute solutions, no. So the answer is A. Question number 14. Dilute sulfuric acid is electrolyzed using inert electrodes. So a similar type of question. What are the half ionic half equations for the reactions that take place at each electrode? So positive electrode will be attracting the negative ions. Which are those? Which are OH. OH because dilute sulfuric acid is SO4, right? But since it is dilute, the water molecules or the hydroxide ions will be going to the positive electrode. So what is the correct option for them? So it can't be A or B because that shows it's hydrogen, but hydrogen is positive. It won't go to the positive electrode. And D is wrong. Why? Because we are supposed to get negative electrons that the positive electrodes will accept. So C is the right answer. We don't even have to look at the negative electrode side, but this is the correct equation for that, for the hydrogen that will be forming at the negative electrode. So the answer is C. Question number 15. Which statements about hydrogen oxygen fuel cells are correct? So once again, this is the type of topic that there are some points and you have to remember them. So A, they convert chemical energy into electrical energy. Yes, so one is correct. Hydrogen is reduced in the fuel cells. Wrong. Hydrogen is oxidized because we add hydrogen and oxygen and we get water. Hydrogen gave oxygen, so 2 is wrong. 3, they do not produce any atmospheric pollutants. Absolutely correct. That's the main advantage of hydrogen oxygen fuel cells. So the answer is 1 and 3 are correct, so the answer is C. So question number 16. So we got a reaction pathway diagram and we are asked to find the enthalpy change. Enthalpy change is basically the energy, the amount of energy the reactants had and how much energy was changed when the products formed, meaning did they lose or gain. And remember this rule. So from the products to the reactants, anyway this is an endothermic reaction. Why? Because the products have more energy than the reactants. But even if exothermic, from the reactants to the products, that's the enthalpy change. Remember this. So the answer will be C. And for the activation energy, that will be from the reactants to the peak. From the reactants to the peak, that will be B. But B is the activation energy, not the enthalpy change. Question number 17. The equation for the complete combustion of methane is shown. The table shows some bond energies. So this is a calculation question and the formula is simple. The reactants minus the products. So if we do that, so there are 4 bonds in the hydrogen, in the methane bond. So 4 times 410 plus, so there is 2 bonds of oxygen in. Why? Because we got 2 moles of oxygen, so 2 times 496. All of this we add together and we subtract from the products. We got 2 bonds for carbon oxygen double bond, so 2 times this 805, and this we add to our water. So there are 2 molecules of water and there are in each molecule there are 2 bonds of OH, so total 4 bonds. We are adding this with that, so 4 times 406, and if we do the calculation we will get the answer as negative 818. And this is a exothermic reaction because we are burning methane, so it's B. Which change is a physical change? A very simple question. Cracking an alkane, no. We are getting different products, we are getting alkenes as well, so no. B. Evaporating ethanol. Yes, evaporation is a physical process. 19. Which statements explain why increasing the temperature in a reaction involving gases, okay, involving gases increases the rate of reaction? So we have to think, when we increase the temperature of a gas in a reaction, what happens to the gas that increases the rate of reaction? First, of course, it increases the collision frequency between the gas molecules. So one is correct. It lowers the activation energy. No, a catalyst lowers it. So two is wrong. It increases the kinetic energy of the particles. So if temperature increases, the internal energy will increase, meaning they'll move faster. If they move faster, the kinetic energy increases. So it's three. It increases the number of gas particles per unit volume. No, increasing the temperature does not do anything to the gas particles, meaning it does not add or subtract. So 4 is wrong. So 1 and 3 is correct. That means A is the right answer. Question number 20. We are halfway there. The equation for the reaction between ammonia and oxygen is shown. And we are also given that it's an exothermic reaction. The forward reaction is exothermic. This is exo. And we are asked to find which two changes to the conditions will both of the conditions should move the position of the equilibrium to the right, to the side of the product. Okay, so since this is an exothermic reaction, in order for the reaction to move to the right, the reaction conditions the temperature should decrease, as the reaction will try to oppose the change. So the temperature will decrease if we want to move the equilibrium to the right. So it's C or D, it can't be A or B. Now for the pressure, if we look at the both sides of the equation, one side has 9, the reactant side has 9 molecules, and the product side has 10. So when we increase pressure, the equilibrium moves to the side with lesser molecules, and when decrease, it moves to the side with more molecules. Here, in order to move to the right side, we have to decrease the pressure because the right side has more molecules. So the answer is D. We decrease the temperature and also decrease the pressure. Question number 21. Mercury 2 oxide decomposes when heated. The equation is shown, and we are asked, why is this a reduction reaction? So this is a reduction reaction, they told us, and now they're asking us why. So let's look at the equation. What is happening? What is reduction? Reduction is the gain of electrons or the loss of oxygen, and mercury loses oxygen here. It's reduced. So we can say there is a loss of oxygen. Question number 22. We have been given some information about two dilute acids, nitric acid and propionic acid. So the concentrations are shown, and now we are asked also their pH, and we can see nitric acid has lower pH than of propionic acid. Three statements are given, and we are asked to find the correct ones. Nitric acid has a lower pH because it dissociates more than propionic acid. Yes, and we can see this from we can clearly see this from the pH. The lower the pH, the better the acid dissociates. So one is correct. Propionic acid has a lower concentration of hydrogen ions than nitric acid. Once again, if it fully dissociates, it will have a higher concentration, right? Not really. It also depends on the concentration of the acid, but it depends more on how strong the acid is, and we have already established that nitric acid is having nitric acid will dissociate more than propionic acid because of its lower pH. So this statement is also correct. It will have propionic acid will have a lower concentration. Propionic acid has a higher pH because it has higher concentration. Once again, concentration necessarily will not mean it is more acidic. Acidity depends on how much of its how much of the acid can dissociate, and nitric acid does that better. So 3 is wrong. This can be a little bit tricky, but if you read the values clearly and you know your concepts, the answer is clear. It is A. Question number 23. We got two elements. Element E is from group 1 and element G is a non-metal from group 7. Element E is also a metal. So both of these form oxides, so they react with oxygen. And now we are asked what is correct about their oxides. Both are acidic, they are not. One is metal, one is non-metal. Both are basic, no. Oxide of E is acidic. It can't be. Metals, when they form their oxides, they will be basic. And non-metals, when they form their oxides, it will be acidic. So the answer is D. Lead sulfate. Lead 2 sulfate is an insoluble salt. This is one of the exceptions for sulfates. Lead is insoluble. And we are asked which method is suitable for obtaining pure solid lead sulfate. We need solid and also it should be pure. So if you look and go through all of the methods, we can see that in order this won't work. This is the wrong method. This is also the wrong method. So we do need potassium sulfate will displace lead, but the method is wrong. The reactant is right, but the method is wrong for A, B, and D is just wrong. That's a different method. We don't titrate for these. Now, mix aqueous lead 2 nitrate with dilute sulfuric acid, filter, then wash and dry the residue. This way we obtain solid lead sulfate and it will be pure. How? When we react lead nitrate with dilute sulfuric acid, the sulfuric acid will displace the nitrate from the lead and it will gain the sulfate. And since sulfate is impure, lead sulfate is insoluble, the residue, basically the precipitate, can be taken away. So the answer is C. Question number 25. The elements oxygen and sulfur are in the same group of the periodic table. Okay, yeah, and they're in the same group. Oxygen is above sulfur. So which statement about oxygen and sulfur is not correct? So the statement is wrong. Which of them is wrong? They both are non-metals. Yes, they both are non-metals. So it can't be A. They have giant covalent structures. No, they both have simple molecular structures. Why? Because oxygen exists as O2 and the same for sulfur. They are not giant covalent structures. Giant covalent structures are of silicon dioxide or diamond. So the answer is B. If you look at C and D, they have 6 electrons in the outer shell of the atoms. Yes, because they're in the group 6, they will have 6 electrons. So C is correct. And D is also correct because non-metal oxides are acidic. So the right answer for question number 25 is B. So tensine is at the bottom of the group 7 of the periodic table. So this is the halogen group and we are asked to predict the properties of the element. So they will ask you to predict the properties of the elements based on their group properties, and if we as we go down the halogen group, we can see that the halogen atoms the elements will become more dense, and also they will have higher melting points and boiling points. Like chlorine is a gas and iodide is a black gray solid. So as we go down the group, this element will be solid and has to be more dense. So the answer is A. It's not more reactive than iodide. As we go up the group, the reactivity increases. Down the group, the reactivity decreases, so it can't be B. and C and D are wrong. It can't be a gas. Question number 27. An example of sacrificial protection is the fitting of zinc blocks to the outside of a ship's steel hull. So why does this happen? And how does zinc is used to protect? Why is zinc used to protect the iron? Because in rusting, if the zinc is attached to iron, zinc will rust before the iron. So the answer is because zinc is more reactive and it will lose its electron more easily. So it will protect the iron by getting oxidized. So we can say the answer is more reactive and loses electron more easily. So it's A. Question number 28. Which statement about alloys is correct? Alloys are harder than pure metals because they contain strong intermolecular forces. No, that's not the reason. Brass is an alloy containing mainly copper and tin. Okay, but what it does not explain. And this is wrong. And C, option C, the different sized atoms in an alloy means that the layers cannot slide over each other easily, and this is correct. So there will be different metal ions and they will be bigger and smaller, and it will become harder to slide. So the answer is C. That's why alloys are used instead of the pure metals. Question number 29. Separate pieces of aluminum foil and copper foil are heated in air. The copper will react and aluminum does not react. The simple reason aluminum is more reactive than copper in the reactivity, but the reason aluminum does not react in the real world because it has a protective layer, an unreactive layer of aluminum oxide which protects the aluminum. So the answer is A. Question number 30. Question number 30. Which of the rows gives the correct equations for the formation of carbon monoxide and the reduction of iron trioxide in a blast furnace? So if you need to learn the equations, but if you don't know, you can still do this question. How? Look at this. So they are talking about iron 3 oxide, meaning iron has a oxidation state of 3. So it's not A and B. A and B, iron does not have the state, and so it has to be from C and D. Now we are asked for the formation of monoxide, carbon monoxide, and we can see C is carbon dioxide, so C is also wrong. So the answer is simply D. Question number 31. A sample of river water contains a high concentration of nitrates from the fertilizers. Which statement about the river water are correct? Now, which statement is correct? Let's see. So we're given 4 of them. 1. It has a boiling point of 100 degrees Celsius. That is wrong. If it has a high concentration of impurities, the water will have the boiling and melting point will decrease, meaning it's not A. It's not 1. 2 is right because melting point and boiling point will change, and melting point is below 0, so that is correct. It's not normal. The melting point is not normal here. Question 3. It turns anhydrous cobalt chloride from pink to blue. Wrong. Cobalt chloride is not pink to blue. That's the opposite actually. So the answer, this statement is wrong. 4th statement is it turns anhydrous copper to sulfate from white to blue. Yes, if you add water to anhydrous copper sulfate, you will get a blue substance, blue crystals. So 2 and 4 are correct options. That means D is the right answer. Question number 32. Which statements about the treatment of domestic water supplies are correct? Again, we need to check some statements. Statement 1 states the water undergoes sedimentation to remove dissolved solids. No, insoluble solids, not dissolved. So 1 is wrong. 2. The water is filtered to remove insoluble solids. Yes, you use filtration to remove the insoluble parts. So 2 is right. 3. The water is treated with carbon to improve the taste. Yes, carbon is used in the treatment to improve the taste. Carbon removes the bad odor from the water. 4th, the water is chlorinated to decrease the pH. No, we use chlorine to kill the bacteria. So 4 is wrong. So the answer is 2 and 3, which means it's C. Question number 33. An experiment to find the percentage of oxygen in 150 cm cube of polluted air is shown. The apparatus is left for 1 week. After this time, the volume of the gas in the measuring cylinder is 122 centimeter cube. What is the percentage of oxygen to the nearest whole number in the polluted air? So what is polluted air? We have to first recall that. Polluted air means it has carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, methane, and all of the bad stuff that is bad for the atmosphere. And all of these and most of these require oxygen. They are either burnt in oxygen or they have oxygen in their molecule. That means the percentage of oxygen will decrease from its original value. C and D are wrong. It's way high. That's not the decreasing part, because normally oxygen is 21, but here the oxygen has decreased because of the pollutants. So the answer is 19. It might be a tricky one, but if you read polluted air and recall what is polluted air made up of, then you can see oxygen will decrease. 34. Question number 34. Nitrogen monoxide and carbon monoxide are both removed from the exhaust gases of a car by a catalytic converter. Which statement describes how nitrogen monoxide and carbon monoxide are removed by a catalytic converter? They both are reduced? No. They both are oxidized? No. It's not A and B. One of them is reduced, the other one is oxidized, and nitrogen monoxide is reduced. The oxygen is removed. Reduced means oxygen moved. Oxidized means oxygen gained. And in the removal, in the catalytic converter, the nitrogen monoxide is converted to nitrogen and carbon monoxide is converted to carbon dioxide, meaning nitrogen monoxide will be reduced to nitrogen and carbon monoxide will be oxidized to carbon dioxide. Propane 1-ol is oxidized by acidified aqueous potassium nitride in a similar way to ethanol. Okay, so it's the same process, and then we oxidize ethanol to get ethanoic acid. Which compound is produced by the oxidation of propane 1-ol with acidified aqueous potassium nitride? So we are basically oxidizing propane 1-ol and we'll get the acid, propaneic acid. Which acid will we get? We have propane 1-ol, so we are supposed to get propaneic acid, where the group is attached to the one part. Now, if we look at the options, A is not an acid, it's actually ethanol, so A is wrong. B is also wrong because it's propanol. C is half right because it's an acid, but it's ethanoic acid and we're supposed to get propaneic acid. So C is wrong and the answer is D. We got 3 carbons, mean it has the propaneic acid with the group as well. So the right answer is D. Question number 36. The structural formula of methyl propane is shown, and the equation represents the reaction of methyl propane with chlorine. How many structural isomers with the molecular formula C4H9Cl can be formed from this reaction? So we are told This is a substitution reaction with alkane and uh, halogen, which means the one of the hydrogen will be displaced by the one of the halogen atoms, and we can see here we lost one hydrogen and gained one halogen. So how many different ways we can arrange this? So the best way to answer these types of question is to draw the diagram. Since this is a simple molecule, we have 4 carbon. I will just draw the carbon because to one carbon the chlorine will be attached, and either it can be to the first one or it can be to the one of the middle ones. It can be here or here, but that's just the mirror image of these both. This and this, they are just flipping them. So it's either on the middle one or on the last or the first one. So only there are 2 possible ways we can arrange this. So the answer is B. 37. Question number 37. Which statements describe the disadvantages of manufacturing ethanol by fermentation? So once again, for these you have to learn the points, the advantages and disadvantages. The process statement 1: the process uses renewable resources, and this is an advantage, not a disadvantage. So A is wrong. 2: the process produces impure ethanol. Yes, it has the yeast that is dead and other impurities. So yes, 2 is right. 3: the process requires high temperature. No, the yeast will be killed if we use high temperature. So no, it's uh, carried out at normal temperature, a bit higher than normal temperature. That's all. So no, the process is slow. Yes, yeast takes time to produce the ethanol, to ferment the sugar, so it takes time. So 2 and 4 are the right options, and D is the right answer. Question number 34. Nylon is made in polymerization reaction. Which below describes the type of polymerization and identifies the other product? So nylon is produced in the condensation polymerization, which means condensation reaction, the reactions react and they produce the product, the main product, plus a smaller molecule is removed. And in condensation reactions, for this we are for nylon, water will be removed. So the answer is C. Question number 39. Which ion forms a green precipitate with aqueous sodium hydroxide? Okay, so we got aqueous sodium hydroxide is green, and it also dissolves in aqueous sodium hydroxide. So if we recall, we need to learn the ions, anions and cations, identification reactions. And for these cations, if we recall chromium, this is the right answer. Chromium will form a green precipitate in sodium hydroxide, and it will dissolve in excess sodium hydroxide, which to form a dark green solution. This is written in the tables. So the answer is B. Question number 40. A mixture of soluble substances can be separated by paper chromatography. Each substance can be identified using its RF value. So we are asked about the RF value formula, and very simple. RF value formula is sorry. So the formula for RF value is equal to distance traveled by the substance that is dissolved in the solvent and distance traveled by the solvent. So solvent will travel all the way up on the paper, and the substance will travel to certain points. The more it travels on the paper, the more soluble it is. So the RF value, distance traveled by substance over distance traveled by solvent. B. I hope you liked the video and you understood the questions you came to understand for.